So this is extraordinary. A clip was posted of Candace Owens a few years ago talking to Gad Saad. Again, this is just a few years ago, where she says, Israel is our strongest ally in the Middle East. That's why it's so important we support Israel. And she's also really shifted in her approach to the issue of Islamic terror and all of that. Seems to be a lot less concerned, a lot less interested in that, thinking that Israel's just trying to stoke tensions. Here she has very different words to say about that. Have a watch of this.
Possibility for Islam to coexist in the West. Do you think that's feasible? I'm not talking about individual Muslims who are lovely and peaceful and all of the rest of the preface stuff that we have to say before we talk about this. But what are your views on Islam?
How's it going in the UK? Those are my views. Okay, you can't. They have different views than us. Their views are that Western civilization is corrupted and awful, and it doesn't follow their code of ethics. It doesn't work. You cannot say that you can coexist peacefully. What's happening in the UK is the greatest example. What's happening in Europe? There's a European crisis going on right now. Okay, they have different ideas of what freedom is. Their idea of freedom is not freedom whatsoever. And you brought up Ian Piercy, and I've followed her closely, and what she says is so important. She is someone that has defected from it and is telling you exactly what goes on. It's amazing to me that people think that somehow if you bring people that actually hate Western civilization to Western civilization, what they're just going to warm up to it and say, we'll coexist peacefully, even though everything you do sickens us.
Well, they will coexist peacefully until the demographic changes are enough that they know. Until are the central doctrines of Islam compatible with our most foundational Western values? You couldn't have a clear answer, and it is no. Now, many Muslims might decide to ignore the endless stuff that's useless in their holy books. But when the demographic changes allow you to then implement further intrusions on the rest of us, it's going to happen. And there is 1,400 years of history that suggests this.
Good luck, Europe. I don't see how Europe's going to get it back. I genuinely feel that they're done. People have asked me this question all the time, and I've looked at it and I've said, no, I think they're done. I don't see how they can get it back. I view America as the last stand for Western civilization. It's why it was so important for us to show a sign of support in Israel. They are our only allies in the Middle East, and the fact that it took us this long to take a strong stand for them is ridiculous, right? So I lived with a Muslim girl. So this is not at all an attack against peaceful Muslims. It's just a basic understanding that Islam and Western civilization are never going to be friends because they're fundamentally different ideas.
So how on earth do we make sense of this shift in recent years? Let's have a look at some more recent content of her to see how different her tone about Israel and Jews are now.
And that what Bibi Netanyahu has done to the Palestinians since October 7th is a Holocaust. It is a Holocaust that is being committed on Palestinian children and women.
Truly, Ben Shapiro, you and the midget horse that you rode in on. And I say that on behalf of the world. I know you're going to get applauded by Konstantin Kisin and Andrew Christ is King Clavin and all of the people, the men who have to keep applauding what you do like you're a 4-year-old to make you feel good. But the rest of the world can't stand you. You're obnoxious. You have absolutely no values that exist outside of the Talmud. You describe yourself as a Talmudic Jew. And I've learned what's in that Talmud, and I encourage other people at home to learn what is in that Talmud so that you know what Ben thinks of you, because he doesn't just hate me, he hates you too, white men. He hates all Black people. To people that are at home, I implore you to wake up to these people who believe that they are contract lords. I challenge Black Americans to wake up to your true history, because your quarrel is not with white men, okay? Wake up to who publishes these books and keeps us warring with one another. Christians versus Christians, right? Christians versus Muslims. Wake up and learn the true history of slavery, because that wasn't exactly a white men sport, okay? Jewish people were the ones that were trading us. Jewish people were in control of the slave trade. They've buried a lot of it, but it's there, and you can find it.
So I actually spoke to Amy Kozak a while back, who did a few interviews/debates with Candace Owens, went on her show, and he tried to explain Israel's case, the Jewish case. And Amy's been following Candace, the whole story with Candace quite closely. And he presented some, I think, very reasonable, speculative suggestions and analysis around what explains her shift. Have a watch of this. She showed such bravery and calmness and clarity in your discussion with. There's two discussions actually with Candace Owens that you did, and I want to talk about this, and then more generally about what you describe as the woke right, about a growing base of anti-Semitism on the conservative right in America and across the West. But let's start off with Candace. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience having discussions with her? What do you think has happened with her? I mean, I remember it started off with Kanye West, and she was defending his anti-Semitism, and then it started to go to Israel. And I followed this pretty closely, and it's all just quite disturbing. And also, many people just didn't see this coming at all. They thought she was really a friend and a classic conservative. So, what are your thoughts on the Candace thing?
Well, so we started dating in high school and then broke up senior year. That's when things got weird.
Hey, no judgment here.
Yeah. She was upset because I ended up hooking up with Pam Bondi. No, I'm just kidding. So look, there were some things I was suspicious about with Candace early on in her career. Like, let's just do a little bit of a profile unpacking here. When she kind of came on the scene, I remember red pill, black female, attractive conservative, and everybody on the conservative side was going, whoa, look at this. Oh my God. Wow, a unicorn. This is so interesting. And I think on certain issues from her personal experience, like the whole Blexit effort was an admirable one, calling out what BLM was. And I think for her, being a black woman in that world, there was a lot of authenticity there and some integrity from her experience in calling that out. And there was a lot of valid points to be made. But there were some moments very early on before all this stuff where, you know, I think becoming a conservative firebrand commentator had this lure, had this sort of potent, you know, attractiveness to want to join that tribe and be part of that brand. And the audience capture was very apparent very early on. She made an appearance on Rogan, right? Where she goes, like, climate change, like, I just don't believe in that, like, at all. Like, I just don't believe in it, like, climate change. Like, I don't know, like, it's just like, no, I just don't believe in it, like, at all, right? He goes, what do you mean? Now, look, I don't really believe in the climate change narrative either, but I've read a lot of Alex Epstein's work on the subject and other people who are sort of skeptical of the whole climate narrative from the left, the environmental narrative. Like, I've thought about that stuff. It's been appealing, and I kind of understand why. But I think in her case, she was just trying to signal to the conservative tribe that, like, I'm on board with all this set of ideas right now. Like, I'm going to be that person, and I'm going to adopt these sort of dogmatic talking points. And it's one thing when somebody gets on a huge platform and says ideas that you don't agree with, even in principle from the get-go. Some crazy left-winger, whatever, starts espousing socialist economic views and they make a bad case for it. Fine. Let those ideas fail. I don't agree with it to begin with. But when someone gets out there trying to represent your ideas and does a bad job, I mean, that to me is, you know, more concerning, because they're getting out there claiming to be conservative or representing ideas and then can't defend them on the big stage. I mean, that's also harmful, I think, in the marketplace of ideas. It does a very big disservice. And so I also saw an appearance where she appeared on, I think it was Dave Rubin, the Rubin Report, against Blair White. And the first thing she sits down and says is, I'm just not going to call you, like, I'm not going to call you she, because that would be wrong to my people. And they just started personally attacking her. And so it became pretty apparent to me at an early stage that, like, I'm not sure if we're acting in good faith here. Like, what's really motivating you? Is it the clicks, the provocation, the attention you get from holding these positions rather than the principle of these positions? That's all pre all this. But then she made a video reviewing one of my comedy videos, and she gave me a lot of praise, so I love her. She stumbled upon a Prince Harry video of mine, you know, where he was talking about unconscious bias, Prince Harry, and that was very helpful. And I was wondering,
That's very good.
Why is the background black in your screen, Ollie? I love that, because you're an ally. And, you know, Meghan and I mean, it was disgusting. We were refugees too. I know we talk about world crisis, but we're also refugees in Montecito. Now, she thought that was hilarious. And, you know, it can be a little bit, you know, I was like, you know, that was a nice, flattering video she did for me, where she covered it. And we started having a little bit of rapport. And then it's interesting. Basically, you know, we all react in this space to personas, right? Everyone has an avatar of themselves online. You know, I don't know. Unless you know Ben Shapiro personally, you don't know Ben Shapiro. You know this Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Rogan. I've never met Rogan. So who knows? And it's funny when you're in the space and you actually meet people, there's personas of them online, and then there's behind the scenes what they're really like. Sometimes people who are firebrands and very controversial are actually super sweet when you meet them, and you're like, oh, interesting. So we are watching theater when we watch the internet, right? And I'm going really deep here on this. So then the whole Kanye stuff happens, the first round where she kind of fumbles the ball, and he has this tweet where he's like, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. And every time she quotes the tweet, she says, I'm going DEFCON 3 on. So he said, I'm going DEFCON 3 on some Jewish people. What's the big deal? Like, why was it a big deal? He said DEFCON 3 on some Jewish people. And I'm always like, he didn't say some. You keep saying some. Throwing it in. The word some kind of changes it a little bit, but she keeps subconsciously or consciously throwing it in. Besides the point or on the point. You know, I think she had this loyalty to Kanye because years ago, one thing that catapulted her profile was him saying, I like the way Candace Owens thinks. Fast forward to today, I think she likes the way Kanye West thinks. But I think that loyalty to him and that clout is very corrupting in a sense. So there's a part of it that's there, and sort of the way the left-wing Jewish community turned on her in that moment. And even before that, when she was talking about, like with Charlie Kirk on stage, Hitler being like, he just wanted to do well by his people, or kind of, you know, speaking very sloppily. But of course, the left-wing apparatus turned on her as a Nazi supporter and all that. So she is a creature of reaction, loyalty, temperament. And if people come at her, she fights back, regardless of the merits of the arguments being made. It's a lot more visceral and emotional than that. You come after me, I'm coming after you. And I think a lot of that was motivating a lot of her behavior, even up until this point. Back to my story with her and where we intersected, things about October 7th started to happen, and she started to say some very troubling things. And one day retweeted the Queen of Jordan, Queen Reina, saying, I think Jews are using anti-Semitism to weaponize people into compliance. She writes back that she totally agrees with this. And then I finally just responded on Twitter. I was so frustrated with all the stuff leading up to this, that she was getting this so wrong. Essentially, regardless of how much you care about American funding of Israel or whatever, to throw down your sympathies or solidarity with the radical Islamic terrorists that just attacked a Western country versus the country that has your values was very, very strange, I think, for everybody. And not having a sense of a sympathy, or like saving your condemnation only for Israel in that case, is kind of weird. Like the first reaction to Israelis getting slaughtered on October 7th was, we shouldn't be involved in this. We have to stay out of this. Like, that's a strange posture on a human level. We're going to get into the weeds on policy, what America's policy should be, funding, not funding, foreign aid. That's not really what it is. I mean, that first reaction to be, we shouldn't be involved in this, like, you know, all that kind of stuff, or just like very little sympathy. Anyway, I responded to it. I had a firm tweet. To her credit, she responded inviting me on the show to talk about this. I think she was in a position where, like, I want to have conversations about this. And so she did, and she had me on for a full hour or whatever, and unedited, she released the whole thing. And that's where that famous clip of the Muslim quarters comment came out. But at the same time, like, people don't watch that whole clip. You know, it's a fun opportunity that you can dunk on somebody. But I think I approached it with, let me approach this as a conversation, not as a confrontational debate. And in that conversation, it was revealed to me very quickly that I think she's just much more profoundly ignorant about this subject than hateful. That's the position I took. I didn't trigger her defenses. I didn't make accusations. But all these other people online are writing hit pieces and articles and attacking personally and attributing things to malice. And I just said, all right, let's just come in good faith and have a conversation. And I think it was a good demonstration of maybe a better way to do these kinds of things and approach these kinds of things. And we had a constructive conversation, started light, ended light with a nice laugh or whatever. And I was encouraged after that to say, like, ignorance is easier to fix than hate. And I was proud of that fact that we were able to have that conversation. This was like November 2023. So it was very close to events there. She was still at the Daily Wire at that time. And once you meet people when the cameras are off, behind the curtain of the internet, you get a different perspective. You know, you meet you confront not just the persona or a clip of somebody, but, you know, that has an effect, a human to human effect. And she's like, I don't get it. All these people are just like attacking me and all. Like, I'm just asking these questions. Now I know that just asking questions, but in a literal sense, if we acknowledge that she's very ignorant about the subject, even in the Muslim quarters versus quarter comment, I sort of talked her through that, and she said, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I did. Now, nobody clips that part up. right? Nobody clips up the part where she said, maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I misunderstood. Everyone likes to say, like, and if I'm being fair, which is hard to do given that how frustrating it's become, everybody brain farts. Everybody thinks they know. Some people say make ends meet and they think it's ends meet, like meat versus make ends meet, right? You know what? We all have these phrases and things that we got wrong. And it's very, very possible that she's walking through the old city and she has some Israeli tour guide who goes, okay, and these were the Arabs. Okay, so these the Muslim, these the cultos, and these were the Arab live and where they are. Okay, and now these were the Jews. And let's be honest, like in Israel, there's complicated areas. There's East Jerusalem, there's West Bank.
Right.
And if you're there and you know nothing about this region,
Right.
you could easily get that wrong. And I think it did reveal, like, now at the same time, I'm not defending the fact that she's feeling like she could speak to millions of people with some authority and make statements of authority on this subject while not knowing anything about it. And that's just what's been revealed. That's the state of the commentariat. When you can build a huge platform with your ideas and talk, you have to own that responsibility too. Like, you really don't know what you're talking about. And then when she said about this, like, no country has the right to commit genocide, I was just responding to something that this congressman was saying. I'm like, you really weren't aware of the context of the libel genocide that's being thrown at Israel constantly, like you. And at that point, I'm like, all right, you know what? Maybe you just really weren't aware. And I kind of gave it that benefit of the doubt. If we fast forward to today, since that conversation, things only perpetually got worse. And she found herself in this corner of the internet in a Twitter Spaces surrounded by vicious anti-Semites. Her whole comment section after the second conversation we had, I followed up months later like, hey, things have only gotten worse. We had this conversation. I thought it was really encouraging. And I don't know what's going on with you, but let's talk. And in that conversation, the second time I said, look, you can claim all day long that you don't have an ounce of hatred towards Jewish people in your heart. But that's not so relevant because your behavior, your statements, the things you're making are providing red meat to so many anti-Semites. And you are doing these things where you're like, these aren't Jews, those are Frankists. Jews are going missing on Passover. You're regurgitating all of these old historical anti-Semitic tropes, and maybe you're aware of it, but you're claiming you're not. But every revelation you have that you claim to be revealing some truth isn't a revelation. It's revealing only your ignorance, that you're not even aware that these are tried and true attempts at smearing Jewish people historically for millennia. Jews going missing on Passover, you think you just discovered this idea? Like, this is an old blood libel. And, you know, at best, you're completely ignorant, and at worst, you're evil about it. So I wanted to confront that and give one last chance to have these conversations in good faith. And whether I think it's an unproductive posture and approach to tell people what they feel in their heart. That's just like, that's what the woke left loves to do. I don't care what you say. I know what you think. I know what you feel. And that's why they have to tell you what to think and what to feel. That is what the woke left does. And that's the position. Regardless of your behavior, of your ideas, of what you espouse, I know what you are based on your identity and what you feel. So I don't want to take that same position and tell somebody what's in their heart, but I am judging at this point behavior, tactics. And when the day after our conversation airs, she posts an episode about Mengele, like, I don't get, like, Mengele, like, what you know, what is this, like, yeah, experiments on Jews? That's just like a waste of time. Why would you do that? And this trivialization of Jewish suffering, this trivialization of anti-Semitism, this manipulative language and constantly sort of going in between, it became sort of signature of woke right tactics that was really, I feel like, damaging to the conversation, damaging to Jews. And this whole, like, you know, strategy to me was started to become very manipulative, narcissistic. And eventually I just said, okay, then it is kind of a lost cause. But that's kind of the whole, I went through a whole, process. You know, the whole different chapters of how it came to be at this point. And I've even like addressed certain things on Twitter where, you know, in every statement, like, she doesn't even realize that she's revealing her hypocrisies and inconsistencies. And that's sort of the state of things. And so at this point, I don't know if it's constructive anymore to dialogue about it, because there's clearly some ulterior motives here. And I think it's, as a creature of provocation, if I can keep poking the Jewish beast and get this reaction, I'm going to keep doing it. And
well, that's what I was going to,
there's a game there to that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because you were saying that what seems to motivate her is if she's got an axe to grind with someone, then she'll just go after them. Do you have any sense of what it could be that's made her decide, I've got an axe to grind with the Jewish community? Is it religion and Christianity? Is it any sense at all?
I mean, it's hard to psychoanalyze from a distance. There's certainly elements of old Catholic Christian replacement theology, anti-Semitism, pre-Vatican II views about the Jews. I'm not that well versed in that theologically. People have made those, are in trying to figure this out, are suspect of that a little bit, that this is deeply theological. I would venture to say maybe that's a part of it that animates it. But and that's, I don't take the position of the Christ is King is anti-Semitic. I know it's been weaponized and used. I see how they use it to troll, but you can't tell a bunch of millions and billions of people across the world that a phrase that they literally believe in is anti-Semitic. Like, it's just a losing strategy. Whether or not you can espouse intentions to the way somebody's using it, I get it. I'm not saying I disagree that it's being used in that way sometimes, but literally every Christian believes that as a phrase. So you're really going to take that on, even if you're trying to be nuanced about how it's being used. Every Christian believes Christ is King. Okay. Like, that's a losing battle to try to take that away from people. So there is the theological argument. There's some merit.
It's tricky when, if it's being like popularized to become associated with a movement that's anti-Jewish. So it's a bit like the phrase Black Lives Matter. Who doesn't? How are you going to disagree with that? But
Yeah, no, and you could say that that's a woke right tactic, to take a phrase that everyone should just be on board with, like helping people. That's what the left likes to do. Are we against helping people? So no, look, there's an argument to be made. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the claims of people challenging the Christ is King folks, that they're using it for nefarious purposes, but you kind of have to demonstrate that. And I think you risk losing a lot of people who say, well, I believe Christ is King. So I just think part of this is tactics, not substance,
Right.
And so there's the theological component to it. There's the temperamental component to Candace, which is that I'm someone who goes against the grain. So when there's too much consensus around me, I'm going to find a way to go against it. That's how I stand out. And I guess going against the grain can be good, but it depends on what the grain is, right? So it should be rooted in certain principles. And I think she believes that about herself. Like, my consistency offends people. And I'm like, it's not your consistency. It's like consistency to a fault. Like, I will never cancel or judge any speech as anti-Semitic because I'm against cancel culture. Like, you're against cancel culture, or we're against what cancel culture was really about, which was sort of like punishing jokes, humor, people who misspeak. That's what's wrong with cancel culture, not non-judgmentalism as a principle. We all judge things. Like, somebody says something,
we need to.
Kanye wears a swastika and starts trivializing Jewish suffering and making fun of Jews and trying to really make a mockery of Jewish suffering and wearing swastikas. And you're going to say, I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to participate in Judas culture. I mean, just made up. What are these phrases you're trying to use to sort of evade judgment? And also, we can be smart enough to say, hey, I have a personal relationship with somebody, but he's crazy and his behavior is wrong. Now, I get it. It goes both ways. Pierce Morgan's trying to get a clip out of her and she doesn't want to participate in that. But I'm sorry, you lose a lot of credibility and integrity when you try to make this brand of, I'm just being critical of Israel and I'm not anti-Zionist. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-Zionist. And then when the most obvious forms of anti-Semitism are presented to you, you won't say anything or critique it. It's like, you want to have integrity here, then you have to be discerning. That's what's required if you want people to perceive you correctly. So pardon me, I think this is really about loyalty and temperament. And if people cross me, and, Gad Sad said something pretty fascinating. He said, the day that Kanye West tweeted that he likes the way Candace Owens thinks, that very same day she went on to unfollow all of the conservatives in her life that made her a popular figure. I was unfollowed. All of these different people around her she began to unfollow. And that was very revealing as to what is truly motivating Candace Owens. That's Gad Sad for you. Didn't think you'd get a Gad Sad impression, but that's a very revealing thing. Not a lot of people know that. He said it on a podcast and he was like, not a lot of people know it. She went on to the day he did that. So like I said, I like the way Candace Owens thinks by Kanye. And maybe years later, she likes the way Kanye West thinks. And I think it's that whole relationship to the Jewish community that's hostile and has a lot of animosity. And it's not rooted in any sort of principle. So, I forgot what are the other things that animate it. It's also look, a lot of this stuff is personal. Like, you work in an environment, there's consensus around Israel at the Daily Wire. Everybody kind of has a similar position for the most part. I know there's Matt Walsh and whatnot, but generally people are supportive. And there is this this sort of what Tucker Carlson is doing too. It's like, how do I kind of curve myself out of this? Like when everybody agreed about BLM in the first iteration of this, I went against that grain. And maybe I agreed with that. And therefore she's drawing these weird parallels, I think, to what she'll claim is like, hey, BLM claimed I wasn't really black because I didn't support BLM. And a lot of Jews are claiming if you don't support Israel, you're not really Jewish. So I sympathize with that struggle. I mean, there's so much ignorance within a statement like that to say that just because two things look alike, they must be the same scenario. And I would just counter by saying, look, BLM was claiming this narrative that wasn't based in data and reality. Okay. And they were just manufacturing this in order to make white people feel guilty and go into submission. In the case of post-October 7th Israel, there is this huge rise of anti-Semitism in rhetoric and in action. There's protests across the West on college campuses across Europe, the UK, the Netherlands, celebrating October 7th, wanting Israel to be exterminated, wanting the Jews of Israel to be exterminated. That's a real thing. So the real concern about that, and for people who are either apathetic to that or supportive of that or sympathize with that, for us to call that out is not trying to get people into compliance or submission. We're not making up a narrative that isn't based in reality. It's supported by reality. And so just because they look the same, you got to think a little bit past phase one on the optics here. I get the temptation, but come on, a little bit of a inquiry here will make you realize like it's a very different scenario. And I get it. There's Jews left of center who tried to get on the BLM train and the left-wing Jewish community and the ADL and all of that. And I get why, that happened. Okay, it happened. It doesn't mean you can't be discerning here and see that this is real, this is going on, and it's not the same thing as the false claims of BLM, just because it seems the same, just because the claims are the same. In some cases, the claims are true, that there's a rise in anti-Semitism that's been going on since October 7th, and a rise in anti-Western sentiment, and all of these things that we should address and be concerned with. And it's just as not true that, from my opinion, that the claims of BLM were way overblown to silence white people into compliance and submission. Yeah. They're making similar claims about scenarios. In some cases, it's true. In some cases, it's not. That's what being discerning and critically thinking about things rooted in principle is. That's what that requires.
Before we wrap up, I want to share something important with you. The entire anti-Israel movement is built on one central accusation: that in 1948, Israel stole the land, and ever since, Palestinians have simply been resisting. But what if everything we've been told about this story is untrue? What if the real history of 1948 shows not Arabs being forced out, but Jews, while seeking peace, having to fight for their survival against a genocidal enemy that willed its destruction long before Israel's re-establishment? Have a watch of the trailer for our new, groundbreaking and essential documentary entitled What Really Happened in 1948. And if you want to see the full film, just click the link in the video description. In 1948, the world witnessed the rebirth of the Jewish state, the State of Israel. A moment celebrated as a miracle of survival and self-determination after centuries of persecution and the horrors of the Holocaust. Yet for decades, this event has been twisted into a narrative of theft and catastrophe, with the so-called Nakba portrayed as Israel's original sin, where Jews allegedly stole Arab land and displaced innocents in a premeditated act of ethnic cleansing. But what if this story is fundamentally inverted? What if the cause and effect are the other way around? Not Israel aggressively seizing territory and Arabs responding in self-defense, but Arabs, driven by deep-seated hatred, rejecting the Jews' legal and historical rights to live in their ancestral homeland and waging a genocidal war long before Israel's re-establishment. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to uncover the unvarnished truth about 1948, the centuries of pogroms and anti-Semitic violence that set the stage, the Arab leaders' explicit calls for extermination, and the defensive war Israel fought to secure its existence. We'll challenge the pervasive lies head-on, showing how Arab rejection of peace wasn't about creating a Palestinian state, but about denying Jews the right to live at all. From the Nazi-allied leader of the Arabs in Palestine, the Mufti al-Husseini, to the forgotten occupations by Jordan and Egypt, where no Palestinian state was even considered, this is the story of a conflict rooted not in displacement, but in whether the Jews deserve to live in their homeland. Join us as we debunk the myths with facts, confront the historical record fairly but firmly, and reveal why 1948 was not an act of aggression, but a righteous response to annihilation. This is what really happened in 1948. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.